Hello everyone! Today I bring you a strong anti-meta team for the Holiday Cup, and it consists of Vigoroth in the lead and then Drifblim and Shadow Aerodactyl in the back. And the premise here is that Vigoroth and Talonflame are by far the most common Pokemon in the Holiday Cup, and they are most commonly used in the backline, so my idea here is that Shadow Aerodactyl is pretty much the best counter to Talonflame, and Drifblim is the best possible counter to Vigoroth, so that's why this team is an anti-meta team. I use Vigoroth in the lead, which is a good generalist with few weaknesses that the opponent is not afraid to switch into either Talonflame or their own Vigoroth against, and if they do, they are straight up lost most of the time because of my hard counter switch. Also, Vigoroth checks most of the anti-flyers and charmers, and most lines are prepared for Vigo in the back but not always to face in the lead, so I really enjoy Vigo lead. The biggest commonly occurring weaknesses for this team is Trevenant and Frostless in my experience. With this team I had a 21-4 run from 2203 ELO to 2455 in just 5 sets, and the next day I slowed down but I managed to hit Bedran, so I think this team is really good to climb with in Holiday Cup, and I had 4 straight 4-1 sets, and now I will show you the 5-0 set that followed. First opponent in this set is Galindo, and he leads with an Alolan Graveler, which is most commonly used in the lead, so that's another thing that makes Vigoroth lead so good. And my opponent goes into Shadow Victory Bell, and I counter switch into Drifblim and throw my Icy Wind as soon as possible, because I don't want the Shadow Victory Bell to reach a move, or at least I want to debuff him as soon as possible if he decides to shield himself and go for a charge move. And then it turns out that my opponent has Rock Throw on his Alolan Graveler, so I'm not going to be able to reach a Shadow Ball, so I go straight for the Icy Wind and let my Drifblim go down, and then I come back in with Vigoroth, and since my opponent has so slow energy generation, there is no risk of this being a Stone Edge. And then my opponent switches into Trevenant, and at this point the game is kinda over, since I have 2 shields for my Shadow Aerodactyl, so it will be able to deal with this Trevenant without any problem. And well, I'm shielding the first Seed Bomb, and then I'm actually going to let the second Shield Bomb go through. And this might not be the best play, but I thought that my opponent's only win con was to somehow reach another charge move with Graveler, so then I wanted the shield for Vigoroth against Graveler. But it was probably suboptimal play by me in the end there. My next opponent is Switcherek, and he leads with an Obstagoon, which is double weak to counters, so I expect a switch immediately, and then my opponent goes into Frostless and I can counter switch into Aerodactyl, and that's great because neither Vigoroth nor Drifblim want to face this Frostless, and my Shadow Aerodactyl can farm down Frostless all the way at the cost of just 1 shield. And hopefully I can get back the shield, because everything that doesn't resist rock will take a whole bunch of damage against Shadow Aerodactyl, because Shadow Aerodactyl is super glassy. So my opponent shields the Rock Slide, and then they farm down all the way. And here I have maintained switch advantage at the cost of just a little bit of energy. And then I check if my opponent has Cross Chop, and they do, so that's good to know. And then my opponent's last Pokemon is a Talonflame, and I get the piggyback right there, so that's good at least. But then here I'm forced to take a risk and go for the Shadow Ball immediately. You saw that my opponent desynced a little bit, so I only made 2 Hexes instead of 3 that I was going to do, so that they only got 1 Incinerate instead of 2. And I was just able to take down the Talonflame, so I actually got quite lucky there that my opponent didn't play optimal in combination with him lagging a little bit. So here, since my opponent is debuffed, I will just be able to survive this cross chop and take down the Obstagoon. My third opponent is Minechir, and he leads with a Vigoroth, and here I will just let my opponent do as he wishes in this matchup. I will stay in, throw my Body Slams immediately, and I will not shield anything. So hopefully my opponent shields to take the switch advantage, and then my Drifblim can abuse his Vigoroth and get a bunch of extra energy. But in this matchup it seems like my opponent does not want to have the switch advantage, he'd rather take energy advantage, so he lets his Vigoroth go down, and then he gets a full Incinerate of energy advantage against me, and I'm completely fine with that, because I have Shadow Aerodactyl, and I got 3 Rock Throws onto that Talonflame, which dealt more than half of its health. So my opponent's last Pokemon is a Wigglytuff. I stayed in a while because I don't need much health on Aerodactyl to deal with the Talonflame. As long as I survive just 1 more Incinerate, that Talonflame is already dead. So that's why I stayed in a while, and then my opponent uses Ice Beam, and of course I shield it, because where else would I use the shields in this game? And then I use my second Icy Wind, take down the Wigglytuff, and my opponent tries to farm down all the way, but I'm able to get off one more Icy Wind onto the Talonflame, and he uses his last shield, and now the Talonflame is actually in range of one single rock throw. So I shield this charge move, and then the Talonflame is KO'd. Moving on to game number 4 against Urunk, and she leads with a Jellicent, which is terrible for Vigoroth, and therefore I switch immediately into Drifblim, and it seems like they have Bubble, so that means that it's also a terrible matchup for Aerodactyl. So really my only good way to deal with this Jellicent is with Drifblim, so of course I'm prepared to double shield it in this matchup. And even if they also double shield my Shadow Balls, I will still deal a bunch of damage with Hexes. But my opponent tries to call the bait, and that's a huge gamble, because now they are in a very bad spot. Even though I also have a big problem with the Trevenant. And here my opponent goes for a charge move, and they choose the right one, because I would not shield this anyway, and if they had gone for a Seed Bomb, I would have been able to undertap and reach another Icy Wind. But then their last Pokemon is an Alolan Marowak, which my Shadow Aerodactyl really likes to go up against, because I resist the Fire Spins, and then I just shield once, so that I can farm down all the way. And here I go for the Ancient Power to fish for a boost, because of course they're going to shield anyways, and then here my opponent needs 4 Seed Bombs to win the game, 3 to KO the Vigoroth, and then 1 more to KO the Aerodactyl, and they realize it's over, so they resign. Moving on to the last game against Tirmikuen, and she leads with a Ferrothorn, so once again a good lead for Vigoroth, and then she goes straight into Charizard, and I counter switch into a Shadow Aerodactyl and absolutely delete the Charizard. So now I am basically 3 against 2, I have 3 full health Pokemon against her 2, and I'm thinking, what Pokemon may I lose against? And I'm thinking that maybe a double shielded Talonflame can deal with both Vigoroth and then one-shot my Drifblim. So that's why I'm actually going to try to farm down all the way with this Shadow Aerodactyl. I use both of my shields, because now I will easily be able to take shields against anything that is not a Talonflame, and if it's a Talonflame I just destroy it with my Shadow Aerodactyl. So my opponent's last Pokemon was not a Fire type, it was a Jellicent, but I'm still winning. I will be able to force both of my opponent's shields, and then they are down to half health. And then as a cherry on top, I go into Drifblim, and as soon as I have shown it and my opponent wants to one-shot me with a Shadow Ball, I switch into Vigoroth to take the Shadow Ball, and my opponent resigns the game. So that's it for this 5-0 set, which was a part of a 21-4 run that I had with this team in Holiday Cup, and thanks for watching!